Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Shark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. A few months ago, we tried something different. We sat down with the Mermelsteins, both Chaim Meir and Aliza, to talk about building a Torah home while juggling work, Torah, and other responsibilities. This format was actually suggested by my wife, and I want to thank her for this wonderful idea. Since we got such great feedback from that episode, we wanted to try it again. This time, we welcome back Rav Yehoshua Pfeffer, a dayan, lawyer, and social activist who we interviewed in the second episode way back in January. But this time, he was joined by his wife, Rebbetzin Tamar, who spent over 20 years as a stay-at-home mother and is now going back to school. She is also the daughter of Rav Reuven Leuchter, a famous Baal Musar and Mechaber Sfarim from Yerushalayim. We spoke about their Shabbos table conversations, getting children to do chores around the house, screen time, and more. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that if you enjoy Shark Tank and want to help us grow, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review and hit the subscribe button. And now, here's our conversation with Rav Yehoshua and Rebbetzin Tamar Pfeffer. My name is Yaakov Wolf, and this is Shark Tank. So we're here in Yerushalayim Ir Kodesh with Rav Yehoshua Pfeffer, who was the second guest on the Shark Tank podcast, and I highly recommend listeners go back and check out that episode. And we spoke about your journey from London and Hasmonean to the Mir and Yerushalayim and then to law school. And today we're joined by Rav Pfeffer along with his wife, Rebbetzin Tamar. So maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your journey, your background, and the home that you grew up in.
I grew up here. I was born in Israel, and I went through Beis Yaakov system, Haredi system, and I studied music. I got married when I was 20. We have 8 children. I was home with the children for 24 years, and then I decided to go study. I'm studying nursing now in Hadassah.
And can you tell us a little bit about your father and your parents and how they raised you as far as the role of the father and the mother in the home? And you could also if you mention that who your father is, so listeners can.
Yeah, so my father is Rav Reuven Leuchter. He's a
well-known educator.
Yes, I'm the oldest of 10. They got married in Switzerland and then made Aliyah. I was born in Israel already. And we grew up in a home. My mother was home with her children the whole time. And my father was responsible for Parnasa, but only in things connected to Torah. He was a mashgiach in yeshiva. He gave shiurim. He speak Talmud of Rav Wolbe, so we lived the whole, these ideas of Rav Wolbe, of Musa and everything, we lived it very much at home. And I think he gave us a lot of, the life was surrounded around the Torah in terms of hashkafa and halacha, yeah.
And when you describe him making it work with Parnasa, even though he was in Kodesh, that really resonates and reminds me of what Rav Pfeffer said about your early years. You started out and you were in Kol for many years, but you made it work doing writing and teaching and stuff like that. Is that how you grew up also, Rav Pfeffer?
Not at all, meaning I grew up in London. I'm sure there are people in learning on some level in London who are able to, make Parnasa from Rabbanos and so on. But the general, direction, the trend, at least where I grew up, going through Hasmonean and so on, was a full expectation that you might be a couple of years in learning, but then you'll go out and, make a living with whichever Parnasa you'll find. Most people went to university. Some people obviously didn't, but that was the expectation. I'll tell you something else, though. It wasn't just the expectation, it was also an appreciation that a dignified life is a life in which you're self-reliant. It was a part of the kind of the ethos was that you want to be self-reliant. And it wasn't so much spoken about. This is not something that was discussed. There was no tension for me growing up between learning and working. It was like almost self-understood. It was an assumption that you would be self-reliant, because not being self-reliant is simply undignified. It wasn't something that was on the table. And therefore, for me, even though I did want to further my learning and to be in Kollel and so on, but for me, it was always kind of an assumption that I would also have a responsibility for making an income and for Parnasa, and even going out with Tamar. This was like on the table. It was not something which I suddenly curveballed after the wedding. My darling, Parnasa's on me, surprise. Not at all. And I have to say, I was impressed. Obviously, I wasn't entirely naive. I mean, somewhat naive as a, chutznik here in Israel, but I wasn't naive enough to not appreciate the way things worked here and the fact that many women want to be responsible for Parnasa. From the beginning, even going out, it was pretty clear that that wouldn't be the case in our home.
And did both of your parents work growing up?
Sure.
So you didn't have a stay-at-home mom?
I didn't have a stay-at-home mom, actually, no. My parents were actually divorced, and therefore my mother, really had to work. But, even though she worked, she was a very caring and very devoted mother. And of course, I deeply appreciated that. But the idea of the stay-at-home mom, Tamar had that from her home. And for me, it was just an unbelievable privilege. I have to say, it was an amazing privilege to know that you're coming home to a home that's stable, that's looked after, that's warm, that there's always someone there for the children to come back to, that they'll have their meals, cooked and homemade and so on. And it also gave me a lot of the freedom that helped me develop, both in learning. I had the freedom to learn. When kids had to go to the doctor, Tamar would generally be able to take them because she wasn't working. And also to develop later on when I did go to law school, when I did go to work in a variety of different occupations, professions, I had the freedom of mind to do that. And it's a privilege that I am deeply grateful for. I know that not everybody has that privilege.
I once heard Sivan Rav Meir describe an election night. She's a newscaster. And she did this all-night marathon where they were covering the results as they came in from 8 p.m. all the way Ada Boker. And so she described how someone was telling her, it's so impressive how you're on the news all night and you're reporting. And she said, let's be real. Who has it harder? Me in the studio all night or my husband dealing with the crying baby all night? So the work at home can be a lot harder than work outside the home. And I'm wondering if you could reflect on that. You did that for many, many years.
So obviously work at home is not easy. It's hard. I think it's hard also because you have to find your interest on your own. There's nothing from outside that will make it interesting. You have to make it interesting by yourself, and you have to make it even shlichut by yourself. It's not there. You have to do it, and it's something that doesn't have. You don't get any rest, and you can't stop. It's like 24/7, and it makes it hard. But I saw my shlichut so much in being at home, and I wanted it. And I woke up every morning, and I had a plan for the morning. We never had, even when the children were home the whole time. Before they started GAN, they went late. They started GAN only later in the years because I was home. They didn't have to leave the house early. So I was home with the children. We never woke up late. We always have a schedule, and we had things we did together because we were, was active, was interesting, was nice.
And when we were talking before, you mentioned the journey. It's not always easy to start out and, call it chalot kashot. So can you talk a little bit about the learning to appreciate the role of a mother at home and learning to embrace those challenges?
In the beginning, it's very easy to say I want to stay at home. It's easy to say. And the reality is a bit harder because you stay at home with a crying baby and you just have to change diapers and cook food and clean the house. And it took me time. It took me a few years to realize that the fact that I'm home with the children, this itself fulfills my need for even for happiness, for simple things. And once I changed my way of looking at it, and I realized this is my shlichut, and doesn't mean that it's easy. And even if it's not easy, it's my shlichut, and I'm happy to do it. It made it easier.
I have to say, it's also not a very appreciated position. Meaning in terms of our neighbors, certainly when you're in the Israeli Haredi space, it's like, what are you doing at home with the kids? Like, are you okay? Like, is everything all right with you? You didn't finish school? You were not able to find a job? Like, what happened? And, my wife would always, Tamar would always be encountering this kind of social critique, as it were. What are you doing at home with the kids? Which is very telling. Haredi society is often portrayed as this, ultra-conservative society, while in other conservative societies around the world, there's a it's self-understood that men go to work and women are more at home with the kids. You have a lot of kids, you need a home. While in the Haredi space, that's not the case. So that's an added challenge in terms of how society boxes you and how, how it's perceived from the outside. And therefore you have to create this internal perspective of, no, this is worthy and this is fulfilling and this is special. And it's not so easy.
That's a great point. And I guess it touches on another issue, which is that you guys are obviously have your own unique path. And as you just mentioned, that it's something that you guys believe in and you do it even though it's not so popular. And I'm wondering, is there any tension in your mind between being unique and having your own confidence in your own way and the idea of community? We have a very strong community, and I could see how being a maverick can create tension. Like conformity goes well with community, and you guys are very much not conformists, I don't think.
We don't live in tension. We don't. And we see ourselves very much a part of the Haredi community. The children go to Haredi schools, and there is no tension in school. There is a lot of, even if we decide to think for ourselves, we respect very much the Haredi community. And I think this gives us an open door to be a part of this community because we really deeply respect them.
Yeah, I would say also we don't see community as something which is, again, obviously it depends on which kind of community you belong to, but you choose your communities. And the community that we're a part of, even though we're definitely part of the Haredi space, we're part of we live in a area that is, strongly Israeli Haredi, but we don't see that as a burden of conformity. It allows you the space to make choices, provided that those choices, like Tamar said, are not out of rebellion. They're not made out of an attempt to kind of undermine the system, but rather to find your own space within the community. And when it's done in a respectful way, and we had these questions the whole time that came up when things that were said in schools, let's say, that we didn't agree with, or the local rabbi said things that we found infuriating and so on. But, you say, okay, that's a space we're in. He was voted in to be the rabbi, or he's the teacher of the school. There's an institutional respect. That's the institutions. And you give it the respect. And once you give it the respect, then you also receive back, the space to do your own thing within boundaries. And we've always found that space to be big enough, certainly for us in the personal space.
With regards to working, especially the two spouses working, so I think in general men and women can work for two reasons, and both of them can exist. One can be a personal ambition and an itch to do certain things, be involved in certain areas, and the other is just good old-fashioned parnasa and money. And I'm wondering if you guys had to make any tough decisions about your lifestyle and your budgets because you only had one income or one person bringing in income.
Parnasa is something which I think you really do see a kind of siyata dishmaya in matters of parnasa, as well as in all matters, but certainly in parnasa, it's not always easy. Of course, having one income alone was not easy, especially because men get taxed pretty highly. So as soon as you earn any real money, you have to pay a lot in income tax. So it's not so pashut, and we're not from wealthy families. We don't have kind of any inherited kind of wealth that we could rely upon. So we really were living based on the incomes that we could make. But it seemed to us, or to me anyway, I'll be happy to hear what Tamar says on this, but it seemed to me over the years that based on the family situation, we always had what we needed. Obviously, that I don't mean to say that this is some kind of a miracle, but I mean to say that we were able to kind of interface and react to the situation with an adjustment of our spending and an adjustment of the kind of income that we made. So, part of my decision to go to law school was because, hey, we need a stable income. Tamar wasn't working and was not planning on working at that stage. And obviously to get to a job, you have to study a few years and so on. And I was making an income based on my Torah occupations. I was teaching in yeshiva. I was doing my halacha stuff for Din Online. I was writing columns. I was doing all kinds of things, but it's a meager income. This is not big money at all. And I felt, okay, the kids are getting older. The expenses are going up. I'm going to have to somehow augment my income. And that was part of the decision to go study at law school. And studying in law school, I didn't know really what I was going to do. I didn't plan on necessarily becoming a lawyer, but it just opened up doors. And that kind of opening up doors is the way you live. You try to see what do you need to do. You have to do your basic, ishtadlus, obviously. And that's how we navigated it. Again, not saying we didn't have harder times. Of course we did. But I don't look back and remember them as being like a crisis, some kind of existential, waking up in the morning and being in a state of panic, a state of terror. It was always kind of, okay, so we'll work a bit more, so we'll spend a bit less, but we'll make it work. Tamar, what do you say?
I just want to say from my point of view as a wife, I think panos is mishamayim, and it comes through the husband, and I really believe in it. And my children asked me once, Mommy, how did it happen that you wanted to stay at home? And exactly you have a husband that can support you and 8 children. And I told them from my point of view as a wife, I said, it's the opposite. It's the way I look at him and I trust him that he can support the family. So he gets the siyata d'ishmaya to support the family. And we had some time that were harder, and we had to think twice if to buy even simple things like yogurt or things like this. And we didn't, but again, it's not hard. It was a fact and a choice.
Yeah, by the way, I think that's an important point. When you look at it, I mean, Tamar says things very tersely, but when you, it's good. When you look at what you have as a choice, then it makes it much more palatable and much more meaningful. Yes, we're living with, we have to tighten our belts and we're living with less. But you know what? That's a choice. Like being in learning is a choice. And being not in learning is a choice, and each one has its costs and its benefits and so on. And once you internalize that these are your choices, then it becomes all the more kind of the experience becomes, number one, more meaningful, number two, much more palatable and easy to accept. Okay, that's your choice. We could have chosen otherwise.
Okay, I'm wondering, Rav Pfeffer, how do you think about your role as a husband and father? And I'm wondering if you would advise differently if someone has a wife who's doing a lot of work outside the home, or it's consistent advice that you'd give to husbands and fathers out there as far as what the yisodos are, what they should be focusing on?
Well, I think the yisodos are similar, meaning, that obviously each father and husband has a set of responsibilities, and those responsibilities, you have to discharge them, whichever way your wife is, whether she's working or not working on a technical level. That's going to change based on what's going on at home and how much you're needed, and how much of your input is going to be required to maintain the balance and to ensure that the children are looked after. But the basic responsibilities, are there the whole time. I would just say that there's always, at a wedding, on the one hand, and I'm a Sadek Kedushin not every week, but I have my fair share of Siduri Kedushin, and there's a wonderful moment in a Siddur Kedushin when you read the Ksuba. Well, why is it a wonderful moment? Because, a Kedushin is something so elevated. It's transcendent. It's about these amazing things of, love and, marriage, harmony, building a Torah home, going back to Gan Eden, Mikedem. It's this incredible moment. And then at the Ksuba, you take out this document, this like legal document, and it's like reading out your rights and obligations. And like, what on earth is this doing at the like chuppah ceremony, which is so, it has such a segev, such an elevation and a transcendence. And here we are reading a contract. And I don't know if you have this in other cultures and religions, but for me, it's such a statement of such a powerful statement that says that you need to have both of those in your life. You need to be living as a father with a wonderful elevation of marriage, of love, with a relationship with the kids that is transcendent and amazing. And at the same time, you need to have your daily responsibilities, your routine, what you have to do. And Parnasa is up there, obviously. Taking responsibility, the Gemara in Vav Metzia, the way I understand it, tells us that your gadlus depends on your responsibility. But of course,
Can you say where that Gemara, just briefly?
Very briefly, the Gemara speaks about it's on Yud Beis, I think, Amud Beis, and the Gemara says that katan, yes, and a katan, somebody who is a minor, who is not samach, who is samach al shulchan atzva, is nikra gadol. And the gadol, someone who's already older, an adult, who's samach al shulchan aviv, he's nikra katan. And for me, that's just a statement that responsibility is gadlus. You're responsible. That means that you're a gadol. You have greatness because you're able to discharge responsibilities. And as a father and a husband, that has to be on your mind the whole time. Are you discharging your responsibilities without belittling the side of the wonders of marriage and the wonders of fatherhood? Tamar, what do you say about this? About role of men in marriages, responsibilities. No, it's always interesting to get the other perspective.
No, I was thinking more about my role, and I'm busy with my role for 25 years. I was busy with your role.
When we talk about, there's so much there that I want to actually follow up on and hear from both of you about, but the bridge between the lofty, elevated, and the practical getting down to work, changing those diapers, cleaning up the house is a very interesting topic. And it really sort of hit me when I started to date. And, in yeshiva, the learning and understanding the iyun and giving the chabur, all these very lofty ideas. And then there was a gap into how, what do I talk about with my wife? Like, she doesn't really care that much about, she's hopefully proud of my accomplishments on a certain level, but there's definitely a gap there. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk about that gap in Torah and the loftiness along with the sort of the more practical.
So I wasn't in yeshiva, so I don't really know the other side. But I know I grew up in a house that the Torah idea in the house was very down to earth. It wasn't just for men, wasn't just for my father or my brothers. We all lived the same idea because the idea was relationship between us and Kadosh Baruch Hu. And in our house we do the same. I can just say what we have in our house, that we speak a lot with our children, and these are the conversations in our Shabbos table about relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this, I think, is to bring Torah down to the world and to the family and to the day-to-day things. And it's not only the yeshiva idea, but maybe it comes from there. I don't know.
I think it's also an appreciation that every halacha that you learn, every sugya that you're occupied with, cannot remain technical. Sorting out, making the cheshbonos and understanding the lamdas. There's also a value system which is latent. It's built in to the halacha. And I think Shabbos tables are just an amazing opportunity to unpack the values within the learning. And you speak about the values. Speak about what this means to us. Speak about, you can be a real halacha guy, but that the halacha has to constitute a set of values that you can pass on, that you can sell, that you can bring down at the Shabbos table and discuss with your kids. And that's just what we do. We discuss the values that are in Torah. We discuss living a Torah life, halachic questions. Every halachic question, there's a value there. And so I'm able to, bring that out in the Shabbos table and then discuss, what would you have said? What do you think about this issue? And that can be parasha based, it can be halacha based, it can be based on so much. The Shabbos table is animated, and every child feels that he or she has a right and a duty sometimes to speak up. We don't place any pressure on the kids to say, but they do it from themselves, and Tamar also. And we just have the Shabbos table is animated with Torah discussion in a way that brings Torah to life, and that's how it needs to be.
The other thing that you mentioned that I really want to ask you, that I want to follow up about, is responsibility. And it's a big topic that you discuss a lot in many different forums. And I recall a conversation that I overheard in the Beis Medrash of Karen Biavna one day, this is going back a whole bunch of years, about whether the guys should be cleaning their own rooms or whether the yeshiva should have a cleaning service. And one guy said, well, we're yeshiva bachar, we have to be learning. The other guy said, and then what? You guys are going to get married and they're going to think that their wife has to do all the cleaning and you're not going to help out sponge the floor for Shabbos. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, I guess, do we have, this goes back to a conversation we had many, many months ago about the role of individual responsibility in our sort of educational system. Do you think that's something that we need to be inculcating more of, and you're getting kids from a younger age to take more responsibility on themselves?
Yeah, I remember Tamar wrote a piece about this once on Tzarachian about during COVID. So do you want to give us a brief, you remember that piece?
Remind me?
About Yeshiva Bachrim at home.
Yeah. So responsibility is, I think, from the minute the baby is born, and I think it's one of the basic things that parents have to teach their children. And the way I teach my children responsibility, I think, is basically to let go. If I manage to let go, and the children, they have the responsibility because I am not there and I don't take the responsibility on myself, then they get the responsibility. And
maybe give a couple of examples, like what do you mean by letting go?
Like very simple examples. Even when I tell my 8-year-old to tidy up her bed in the morning by herself, even if I tell her and I show her how to do it, if I'll do it at the end of the day because she didn't do it, she won't be responsible for it. The bed has to be the bed has to be like messy for a week till she will learn to take the responsibility. So I can't take it on myself. Responsibility is something that only one can carry. If I carry the responsibility together with my children, it will be my responsibility. So I just have to let go. And I think the responsibility touches all places in life, everything, because a child that is brought up as a responsible child will be a responsible husband, will be a responsible everything.
And you said like from the baby's born. So let's say I have a 1.5-year-old. He's starting to say little words. He was really great at doing a lot of damage, a lot of different things. How do I inculcate him with responsibility?
He will, I don't know if there's so much to teach them. There's just a lot to let them see by themselves. When they walk around and they fall down, you don't have to say, you see, I told you not to walk here, otherwise you fall, because then you take the responsibility, you just let it be. And then they learn that when they walk there and they shouldn't have to, they fall.
And I guess a one area where that responsibility, I'm sure, is comes up very, very strongly is the area of technology. And, you know, again, as I mentioned, I have these little kids around, and they see they're gonna know and how much how they interact with their phones, and they see their parents. I'm not sure if I'm the best example of proper technology use and giving the right attention and focus. And it's a little bit shocking, you know, when you see the 1.5-year-old taking a little plastic phone and going allo, and texting like he's I don't know what. So I'm just wondering if you guys have any practical tips about having a sense of responsibility and navigating the challenges of technology with little kids at home.
Well, so I think it's a big issue. It's not easy, but I think it's only one part of chinuch. It's not like the whole thing. It's one part of chinuch. So when I, as a parent, I teach my children responsibility in many different areas. So they'll manage to be responsible also in this place. I'm not saying it's easy, it's hard, but I think my role as a mother in terms of technology is to teach the children very basic big things like responsibility or like relationship with themselves, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, with people, or like dealing with their failures. And once they learn it in many different ways, in many different areas, they'll get the tools how to deal with technology. It's hard, it's an issue, but it's not out of the blue. It's a part of chinuch.
Yeah, I would also add that it's dynamic. It doesn't stay the same. You know, the home changes over the years, and it should. There's no reason why a home should remain static over 20 years, both because of technological changes, but more importantly, because there's a dynamic with the kids and with the family. And an older child is going to bring home a computer for his or her studies and so on. And that's going to change the dynamic. And there'll be different needs for different children. And you know what? The parents too will make different decisions over time. And, you know, sometimes, you know, we have computers in the house, and sometimes we see the kids are having, you know, too much screen time. So we say, okay, you know, we're going to have to change the rules. Okay, now only Fridays you can get to see, you know, some kind of a movie or some kind of a screen time on Fridays, and the rest of the week we're going to have to invest much more time in projects, in books, in reading with the kids, and doing other stuff. You know, there's always this dynamic, and then there are other, you know, periods of life or times in the year where you'll allow a bit more, whether it's vacation time or whether it's some kind of another routine time. It's just very dynamic, and you'll have kids who are older and will be more susceptible also to falling and to failure with challenges with technology. And then, of course, you have to think both about what kind of screening you have at home, but both about how do you navigate that? Do you have a panic attack, you know, Gewalt, like what's my son been seeing? Or do you say, well, that's also a part of life. How can we facilitate that as an avenue for growth, like to be stronger the next time around? And we've never believed strongly in bringing up kids in a sterile bubble. That has a danger too. And our kids, I don't say this in a condescending way at all, but there's a contrast sometimes between our kids and some of their Israeli friends that are being, you know, kind of raised in more of a sterile bubble, but then they get so excited. You know, wow, I heard this like woman singing on a bus on the radio. Wow, really? You know, and our kids like, what's wrong with you guys? You know, come on. And you know, it's so that there's a balance here, and there's a dynamic that you have to be like open-minded about. It's not something that you can say when you get married, this is our rule, we're going to keep to it for 20 years. It just doesn't work that way.
I felt...
I just want to add one thing. When it is dynamic, it's very dynamic. It depends on the age of your children. It depends on the time of the year. And I just want to add that when we decide to make the rules a bit more strict, there is a period of time that it's hard for the children. And then they can, cry over it and, be very upset. And then I have to invest more time, and I do want to do it. So we have more projects and we have more things. And it's amazing to see the children themselves, they realize how happy they are without the screen. They find it in themselves, the satisfaction, they appreciate the time without the screen. We just have to go over the beginning, and then they love it.
I really appreciate that. And it almost answers the next question I was going to ask, which is I sort of felt anecdotally that the more devices and screens that are on and around, whether mine or others, it's just like almost a direct correlation to how much attention is in this given room, which makes Shabbos very special. On the other hand, it makes other situations more challenging. And, there's no going back in time. We're here in 2024, and I don't know if any of us have the clock to change the clock back. Then I'm just wondering if there's any other, thoughts on that topic about creating a home where technology can be integrated in a way that's healthy and doesn't create too much tension. Even just like seeing the reaction of a child after coming off the screen or being told he has to come off the screen. Do you have any other tips or advice on that?
I think it's something that a parent has to be very aware of it, and I can't really give time to anyone because each one is different, and each parent knows his children. But we definitely have to be very aware of this issue because it's an issue. It messes up their feelings that they come out. They don't know, messes up their feelings when they come out of the screen. So, and each one has to decide what to do with it and has to invest time. You can't really tell the children, now there's no screen, and then leave them alone because they don't know what to do with their time. We as parents have to invest time and thoughts and think what we can give them instead of the screen.
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple of other points also on this. First of all, there are a lot of different decisions that are legitimate. It's not like one legitimate path and everything else is not legitimate. I think one of the main things is just to take the responsibility, to take the conscious decision, to be aware. If you don't make a decision and then you just allow your house to be flooded by screens, and then 2 years later you wake up to a new reality in your family, well, that's because you didn't make the decision. If you made the decision and then the consequence happens based on your decision, whatever it is, good. That's your responsibility. You took it, you thought about the potential consequences, and you made that decision, and that's fine. There are many levels of, within a spectrum of legitimacy. The problem begins when people are unaware, when they don't think about it. And all of a sudden, the home is flooded with information and a culture and ideas, and you don't know what's hit you. And I think that's a very important point. The second point I would make just on this is that, Tamar and I come from different backgrounds. And I grew up in London in a very open environment. Tamar grew up in Beis Yaakov, in Ramot, and in Sorotskin. These are two very different environments and very different backgrounds and very different levels of exposure and what we're used to. And just as a couple, we really had to work through, and sometimes still, have to work through, okay, what do we want to expose our kids to? What do we think is healthy? What do we think is potentially damaging? How do we reach a kind of compromise? This is something that we invested a lot of and still do, energy in speaking between us, because we didn't come from the same starting point. And I think that's true for many couples, not all, but we don't share the same starting point. We have different expectations and different levels of comfort levels. And that requires a lot of, ironing out, especially when kids get bigger and you get bigger questions.
You mentioned creating programs, projects, stuff for the kids to do that's alternative. And so we're recording this now in summer vacation, and it's a time where people have to figure out what to do with their children. And something which I really thought about a lot during the pandemic is the fact that we've gotten so used to outsourcing so much of our childcare that when kids come home, it's almost like, what do we do with ourselves? It's a completely new reality. And I'm wondering, as a couple who's thought this through, what are some of the tips or things you could suggest for parents who want to have healthy, constructive things for their kids to do with their time that build them up, that create a wholesome, healthy Torah child, and that will hopefully, B'ezras Hashem, be an adult during times where they're not in their miskarot.
So what I think I can tell you my experience, I think it's very important to stay very, very simple, because children enjoy simple things. You don't have to get big ideas from anywhere, just to stay simple. So the things I did with my children before they went to Gan, they left their house when they were 3. The things we did till they were 3, I don't even think I sat with them and played games and did projects. We filled the washing machine together, we cooked together, we cleaned together. They loved it. And I liked it very much. It was nice, it was simple. And also now during COVID, we had 8 children at home from the age of, I think, 22. Yeah. And it's not that we have one room each, we have to share the space. And it wasn't easy. We had a schedule on the fridge. We had a schedule every day with simple things like exercise, like cooking, like reading time, like very, very simple things we can create from home. And I think the idea of schedule gives the day a meaning, even if there are very simple things written on the schedule. Again, like reading and playing and eating lunch, really. But it gives the day a schedule. I think it's very, very important. And stay simple.
Yeah, I think that the simplicity thing is amazing, and it's something that I learned from Tamar. In the modern age, and it was true on a certain level for me growing up, it's so easy to have sophisticated toys and advanced kind of, whether it's your Nintendo and space stations and who knows what, like sophisticated ways of occupying your time. And for parents, maybe it's a bit easier. You can take a step back and, your kids will occupy themselves with whatever they're doing. The idea that you can go back to something simple and find meaning in things that are everyday, they're everyday things that we do, part of the everyday routine, and yet give it meaning, give it an occupation that has fulfillment, that you feel you're achieving something, you're doing something. You have your cooking time and washing up time. And this for me was a wonderful insight, and I think a very important chinuch insight. We want our kids as adults to find meaning in the mundane, in the everyday. Without that, you're always going to be looking for your thrills and, looking for, ever expanding range of, kind of being emotionally fed, all kinds of the never stopping expanse of gimmicks. And to be happy and fulfilled with the simple is just a wonderful chinuch insight.
One aspect of that, which you touched on. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add that the fact that we give the children the opportunity to occupy themselves in simple things at home, like helping at home, it gives them the opportunity to value themselves by themselves. They don't need somebody from outside. So if my daughter cleaned the candlesticks, for example, for Shabbos, and she put them back on the piano, when I light candles on Shabbos, she's happy that she's a part of the house. It makes her feel a part of the family. I don't need any big park or somebody from outside to help her to feel her value. She can do it by herself because she's a part of the family.
And one aspect of that, which you guys touched on, but maybe didn't exactly speak out, was the fact that, my Rebbe Rav Stav likes to say, the phone is smart and you're not. And when you take little kids and you give them a very simple toy, it forces them to use their imagination and their skills to make something interesting out of it, which they're usually able to do. And the more sophisticated the toy is, the less they have to actually make it interesting. And that dynamic is something which is also an advantage of, simple activities, simple toys, simple games, is that it really allows the kids to give more of their input, and that's a lot healthier for their development as well. Is that true?
I see it in our children. I can say only my experience. I see it with my children. I spoke English with the children, and they went to Gun in Hebrew when they were 3. And people ask me, why don't you teach them Hebrew before they start Gun? Colors, shapes, whatever they need, because they didn't leave the house and they don't speak Hebrew. And I was always busy with simple conversations with her children. I didn't teach them anything, just things that came up from the child. And I always said the children will study, they'll manage, they'll do it. And they all did very well. And I just give them, I felt this is the time I can give them to develop their imagination, because then in school they get it much less.
Yeah, I would also add that, reading is a wonderful advantage in this. I know that not every kid is a kind of natural reader, but there's certainly, there's some nature there, but there's a lot of nurture there also. And having a lot of books around, kind of bringing up your kids to read rather than to passively watch things on a screen, but rather than to read them, you're a partner when you read. You're interpreting the words, you're understanding it the way you imagine it. It's for you to infuse your own meaning, your own imagination, your own interpretation, your own emotions, and so on. It's much more active than watching a screen. And we're blessed with kids that just read the whole time. And that's also something which I think, dovetails or goes together with what we're saying here about finding the meaning in the simple.
Did you ever do those like reading charts or penny a page type of programs for your kids, or are they just latched on? And
My wife would not stand a penny a page. You want to say a word about this rewards?
I just think that if I do it in any, whatever, in helping at home or reading or something,
Meaning rewarding kids, you mean?
then I take I put the child in a place that he does whatever he needs to do for me. And I want him to do it for himself and to be happy with the results by himself. So I think I just have to create the right environment, like less screens or time to read books or books, going to the library or buying books, and to give them the option to be able to read or to help at home. And I think this is an opportunity to show the children that they make themselves happy. They're happy from themselves. They don't need somebody outside to make them happy.
wow, and you guys can tell me to take us out of the recording, but I think I'll just mention to our listeners that sitting a few feet away from us is Ayola.
Yeah.
How old is she?
8.
She's been sitting there reading a book very peacefully and quietly for the last 20 minutes, and I'm very impressed, maybe more than that. It's very, very cute to see. One of the things that you mentioned also is, one of the things that this touches on is the idea of money and educating your children to have a relationship with money that's healthy and mature. And I'm wondering if you have any takes on that. It's interesting, speaking to different friends about how they were brought up as far as their awareness of finances and money and responsibility for their own personal finances on a very small scale and age-appropriate way. I'm wondering if you have any takes on that you want to share with us.
So also, I don't have like a lesson I teach everyone. I know my experience, and my experience is also dynamic because it depends on the age of the children and of the environment around them. First of all, I think there's a big difference between boys and girls. I think boys naturally are more interested in money, and it's good. And that's how Kadosh Baruch Hu created them, because they have to be responsible for parnasa, and I think it's good and excellent. And so we don't give the children money just, with the age that we see no interest in money. But once they're interested in money, so we are careful to give them sometimes, but we are careful not to do it every week at a certain time, because then it becomes like something I need to do.
They're entitled. We don't want the kids to feel entitled.